Bobby Broyles and Tim McDonald here.
Should be a really interesting matchup. Buckle up. If you're not watching, you got some problems.
Week 1 is in the books. Welcome in, CA football fans, to another edition of This Week in CA Football, presented by Geico. Bobby Broyles alongside Tim McDonald here. Hope all of you had a safe and happy Labor Day weekend. And Tim, it's safe to say it was a solid first start to 2016 for the conference, highlighted by 2 wins over FBS opponents.
How could you not start with that? I mean, FCS in general only had 4 upset wins. 2 of those are in CA football. You look at Albany, a heck of an effort for the Great Danes. First ever FBS victory at Buffalo. A back and forth game, a Friday night game. It's just a phenomenal win for that program, for Coach Gattuso, for the players too. Just we talked about them needing to believe that's only going to help this season. Talk about Richmond. I mean, that's just an absolute. Not only did Richmond win at UVA, that was a domination. 37-20, over 500 yards of offense. And even Maine, as much as we take away from the first weekend, could have beat UConn, maybe should have beat UConn, but still a very valiant effort to lose in the last couple seconds to another FBS foe. Richmond's win was snapped in ACC's 68-game FCS winning streak. I mean, we only had 1 FBS win in 2015, so we got 2 in the first weekend. So, I'm like a kid in a candy store right now. It's just, I mean,
great start indeed, yes.
Kyle Auletta had a heck of a game. Brian Brown, we talked about that. 337 yards passing, just looked poised. I was there in Charlottesville. The offense just came out, didn't miss a beat. Up and down the conference, I mean, offensively, you have to be impressed. The first thing, Delaware, obviously. Welcome back. Wes Hills misses most of 2015 with a foot injury, comes back, rushes for over 200 yards, 56-14 win for Delaware. And James Madison, 80 points. 80. Hello, Mike Houston. Welcome to Harrisonburg, my friend. 80 points in the first game over Morehead State. We'll get into that in a little bit. Stony Brook, got to give credit to the Seawolves as well. A huge win over then 19 North Dakota. Defense allowed 177 yards of total offense. Scored on a fourth quarter blocked punt. I mean, that's Stony Brook football right there. That's how you get it done late against a very good team. Overall, 3-1 record versus FCS teams. I think it's just perspective. Teams like Wayne Mary, Villanova, Towson, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, you lose in tough fashion to FBS teams. I mean, let's not forget, though, New Hampshire in 2014, Toledo got blown out, still had a good year. Richmond last year versus Maryland gave up a lot of points, lost by a lot. And guess what? The season wasn't over.
Exactly.
1 game doesn't define the year. It's a theme I think is going to stick with us here through the early couple weeks, but you have to be impressed with Albany and Richmond right off the bat. How could you not? 2 FBS wins. Phenomenal way to start the season.
Puts an extra smile on your face.
Let's get going. I'm ready to go now.
With all the waiting for the season to start, week 2 is already here. For mini non-conference play continues this Saturday, but let's start with the first conference matchup of the year when Albany heads to Rhode Island at 1 o'clock, trying to ride the momentum of that big win, Tim.
Of course, you got to start with the teams who were just talked about.
Exactly.
The Danes, I mean, how about the Great Danes? We talked about it. First ever FBS win, 22-16. Lose at Buffalo to start last year, 51-14. You're thinking, well, it's going to be a really tough, I don't know what the Danes are going to have in it. But all of a sudden, that game starts getting close. You see Albany can find success running the ball, 125 rushing allowed, 113 passing, but they had 3 picks, too. That was the key.
Turnovers.
Look at that. If you told me that Albany was going to give up over 400 yards, I told you they'd have no chance, but only allowed 3 field goals and 1 passing touchdown. Belief and mindset, I think moving forward is going to be huge for Albany. Not only do you win the FBS game that no one expected you to win, but now you go into the conference opener versus Rhode. It's on the road, yes. I think that's going to be tough. And we know those 2 teams have opened up conference play the last couple of years. You've won 2 straight versus the Rams. I'm really interested to see a team like Albany, like we said, not really expected to win that FBS game. All of a sudden, how do you handle that expectation? You just beat an FBS team. Now you have to play Rhode. A tough loss for Rhode at Kansas. Rhode did rush for 170 yards. Last year's best was 149 yards in a single game, so that gives you some hope. Harold Cooper, the stud running back, actually hurt himself in a punt return situation. Didn't have a rushing attempt, but still, TJ Anderson and Wes McCoy rushed for over 50 yards. So Rhode, you have to take. I know it's a blowout win to Kansas, and I know it's tough. Wes McCoy starting in that situation. It's still, I think it's a chance for both teams. Albany can make a statement at Rhode Island in the opener of the conference play, get off to a good start, and Holy Cross at home, St. Francis at home, Richmond at home in the next 3 games if you don't look ahead. On the other hand, Rhode Island, the season's not over. Like we said, you get the conference opener at home versus a team that had high expectations last week after an FBS win. Both teams right now have a huge upside, obviously, if they can win this game. It's a big one for the conference opener. I'm excited to see how both teams respond from week 1.
Keeping the theme going, another team coming off a critical win is Stony Brook, and the Seawolves have a tough task in Philadelphia versus FBS foe Temple at 1 o'clock on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app.
I do love the fact that Stony Brook started out with a tough FCS game because Yeah, 13 points, 13-9, not the sexiest win.
No.
It's still a nice way to start the season. At least, it's not as if, well, we still have some question marks on both sides. You really got the job defensively, and when you need to beat an FBS team, what do you need to have? You need to have a solid defense.
Exactly.
Not to say that that just is automatically going to translate, but Jaheim Woods, talk about him. A heck of a week. CAA Defensive Player of the Week, National Defensive Player of the Week. 11 tackles, 5 of those for loss, 3 sacks. Seems like he was everywhere.
Yes. Stony
Brook's defense, like we said, an impressive showing, holding North Dakota to 63 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. Did allow a safety, but you still, no big deal there. Move on. Temple lost at home to Army, an upset win, a little bit of a surprise. Army's a triple option team, but lost 28-13 and allowed 329 rushing yards. Coach Priori, interestingly enough, coached at Penn, so this Philly connection will be back. In the 1990s. He coached there, and his brother right now is a second-year coach at Penn, so I'm sure he'll have some family members there in Philly. It's going to be a really tough task. I think the defense is going to keep Stony Brook in it. I think the question is for Joe Carbone in the offense last week, 159 passing yards. Again, not the hugest upside on that, but still, you take what you can away from that. Ray Bolden with his favorite receiver. I think the offense of Stony Brook will start to come together. It's obviously tough. I think North Dakota is a very good defensive team, so I think it's going to be tough versus an FBS opponent, but you have to take that in strides. Really interested to see. We know how good Stony Brook's defense is. I want to see them stack up against the big boys at Temple.
After scoring 80 points last week in Mike Houston's
what did you say?
80. Mike Houston's debut, 80 points. I have no idea. JMU looks to keep its offense rolling at home versus Central Connecticut State on CA.TV at 4 o'clock.
Central Connecticut State, a team out of the NEC that has played CA football well. It's that New England school that has played a lot of CA football teams up and down the coast in the last years, but 80 points in a Division I game. Just think about that. 15th team in Division I in the last 10 years to score at least 80 points. 10 rushing touchdowns, set a new program record. 3 players over 100 yards rushing. Take your pick. Brian Shore, over 100 yards. Taylor Woods, both of them had 3 rushing touchdowns. 13 total pass attempts, which is interesting, but you didn't need to pass the ball when you're running it that well. If we had any doubt, maybe I did, but Brian Shore, did he just claim that he's the starter? He looked pretty good to me. Obviously, it's Morehead State, and you can't get too excited, but Central Connecticut State, a little bit more athletic, a team that turned the ball over 5 times in a season-opening loss last week to Lafayette, 24-10. Mike Houston and the era of maybe he'll come in and implement a good running game and see if that works well. I think it did. I think it's off to a good start in Harrisonburg. Got to stay focused at home. That's going to help. But the Mike Houston era started with 23,000 plus fans in attendance. Only good signs. Only good news, too, that you're back home this week versus a Central Connecticut State team that also lost.
A busy 6 o'clock time slot with 6 games kicking off. Starts with Delaware hitting the road to take on Lafayette out of the Patriot League. The Hens started fast with their run game last week. I think they must have watched our episode.
I know, they must have listened to us. Yeah. Quick start, and it was like, I think you might have texted me and said, wow, look at how fast they're starting.
Yeah.
Lafayette, the team we just talked about, beat CCSU to start the year. Lafayette QB, though, Drew Reed completed 31 passes, 316 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I just think, Delaware, 395 rushing yards. Look at that game. Not only was it a fast start, it was just a dominating start.
Yes.
Every time that line moved and it pushed back Delaware State, it was just, you knew they were going to run for some yards. Wes Hills, like we said, missed most of the 2015 season. All he did was basically rush for 200 yards, 212 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Almost in the first half of play, so absolutely phenomenal to see him back at full strength. And Joe Walker, like James Madison and Brian Shore, didn't need to pass the ball that much, but a very efficient night, 6 of 9 for 66 yards. Also, did you see Deontay Cherry's catch?
Oh,
that one
beautiful.
touchdown?
Yep.
Phenomenal catch. Just all over. But the hype for Delaware heading into 2016, we talked about it. How are they going to respond? Now they hit the road, a little bit of sense of urgency against a Lafayette team that also is 1-0. Interested to see Delaware's defense. Delaware State is not Lafayette, but Delaware's defense, I think, can handle that.
That game follows with another Patriot League matchup as Villanova plays host to Lehigh.
I think it was a respectable showing for Nova. How do you say respectable, Tim? It was a 28-7 loss. Yeah, Pitt's a very good team. Pitt, defensively especially, is a very good team. A 28-7 loss, but trailed 7-0 right before the half. A touchdown with 19 seconds. Okay, it's 14-0. Then Pitt opens the second half with a kick return touchdown. So all of a sudden, as many times in FBS games, that game spiraled out a little bit. Defensively, though, Villanova, that's a Pitt team, like we said, a very good running attack. James Conner, congrats to him. He's back. But still, 86 yards rushing for Pitt, 2.5 yards per carry. Andy Talley, you have to be happy with your defense. Only 5 starters back, and that's what they do. Okay.
And a defensive touchdown, too.
Exactly. That's the only score. You're right. But Lehigh's going to be a good test. I like this. The fact that it's at home only helps Villanova. And Tim, how's Lehigh? Well, Lehigh's a very good team. Lost last week, and a little bit of a surprise to Monmouth at home, 23-21. Nick Chibnasky, though, the quarterback for Lehigh, athletic, dual-threat guy, is going to give Villanova's defense some struggles. I think it's only good, though, that Villanova's defense knows it can do that against Pitt. Now it comes home against Lehigh. I think it's only going to give time to get that offense. Bednarczyk, we saw Javon White a little bit as the starting running back. It gives that offense time to progress and develop. And I think this is a good test for Villanova right out of the gates. You got to show up to play in this one, and I think they will.
Elon hopes to bounce back after a tough home opener and are on the road at FBS opponent Charlotte.
A couple of things to look at. I mean, is there good news? Yes. The good news is Charlotte lost 70-14 at Louisville last weekend.
Yep.
The bad news is, obviously it's disappointing to come away with a loss in week 1. You never want that to happen to Gardner-Webb, 31-6. The bad news is, though, Connor Christensen, we don't know how hurt he is, hurt his shoulder. Status is a little bit unknown. On the conference call this week, we were unsure but you got Daniel Thompson back, so quarterback isn't going to be a huge deal. 3-3 at half for Elon, outscored 28-3 in the second half. I was disappointed in the running attack. Gardner-Webb's, I think, an improved team, a better team. But Elon's run attack, I think, needs to improve and needs to progress in order to have any success against Charlotte. Obviously, it's an FBS team. Obviously, that's clear. But it's a different FBS team because it's only a second full-time year for Charlotte as an FBS team. Remember, Elon beat Charlotte in 2014. A completely different situation, but still, I think Daniel Thompson, if he has to play, good news is he did play last week, finished out the game. Elon was outrushed 327-59 last week. That was the difference in the game. I think the Phoenix need to have a little bit more balance there in order to have success. Charlotte's coming off that loss, so you do have to feel somewhat good if you're Elon going into this one.
Following that impressive win at UVA, Richmond stays home to take on Norfolk State. You can see this game on Comcast Sportsnet Mid-Atlantic.
I mean, I said I was there, and I said I was impressed, but you have to be thrilled for the Spiders. First FBS win since 2011. First over UVA, since 1946. You see the smile on Danny Rocco on the player's face. In the third quarter, I mean, that game, you could argue the game was over in the third quarter. That second half just logged on and just rolled on. But 524 yards of offense against an ACC team, I don't care. I don't care who you are. That's impressive. The rhythm and sync was there. I witnessed it firsthand. I just think the offense knew exactly what it wanted to do. 4 turnovers forced. I don't know what I became more impressed by, Richmond's offense or Richmond's defense. I mean, 38 rushing yards allowed versus UVA. Very impressive, but you have to move on. Norfolk State is a team coming in. I mean, Gordon Collins last week for Richmond. We saw takeovers the running back, 114 yards, 1 touchdown. Norfolk State, gave up 271 passing yards. They did win last week, though, 20-12 over Elizabeth City State. Ties to Richmond here. It's interesting. You think of Latrell Scott, the head coach for Norfolk State. Rhode Island's head coach, Richmond's head coach in 2010. And the QB coach, of course, is Aaron Corp, who's a USC transfer, who's also a quarterback in Richmond in 2010 to 2011. It's going to be interesting because you go from the highs and the lows of Richmond beating UVA. Everyone's writing about you. Everyone on social media is telling you did such a good job. If any coach, though, I think Danny Rocco is going to get them back home, and back square level, back ready to play for the second game.
Of course, the Spiders getting some national attention as well. Climbed up 2 spots in a lot of polls.
Number
2, right behind North Dakota.
That's what you do, I guess, when you beat an FBS team like that.
Exactly. William & Mary now looks to get its first win on the season, making the quick trip to Hampton. Another MEAC opponent here.
Yes, another MEAC opponent back-to-back. And it's interesting because, William & Mary will also play Norfolk State at the home opener in 2 weeks. But can't be too frustrated if you're William & Mary. It's a tough opener at NC State. Defense gave up over 500 yards, but that's a pretty good NC State team. The run game didn't really get going. We saw Kendall Anderson not really find a rhythm. We saw Steve Cooley threw 2 picks. But I don't think you freak out if you're William & Mary fans or if you're William & Mary because you're still a very good team. Clearly, on offense, can improve this week. I expect him to improve this week. Hampton's a team that lost to Old Dominion, got blown out a little bit. Close in the second half early, but then they kind of rolled over there. Devontae Dedman, though, I mean, that's a positive you have to take away on offense. 5 catches, 75 yards, a couple of Nintendo-esque plays there against NC State. If he's doing that against NC State, probably doing something well. Probably something that's going to be good for the season moving forward. The defense, I think, can expect to play better. We know Corey Parker gained national attention, National Freshman of the Week. That's a plus because we really didn't know who that guy was after that first week. Like we said, though, next week, William & Mary will come back home. It is tough to start the year 2 straight trips. I know they were disappointed last week. I think you can make up for it right now. This is the bread and butter of CA football. You can get over that FBS win. that FBS loss and come back and take care of business in non-conference FCS play.
And the final 6 o'clock contest features the Tigers of Towson, also looking for their first win of the season, return to Johnny United Stadium to welcome St. Francis. Catch this contest on CA.TV.
Much like William & Mary, I don't think Towson, you can't afford to think back and say, man, we should have played better last week. South Florida's a very, very good team.
Yes,
That's the team that was picked to win their division in the American. 28-10 at half, outscored 28-10 in the second half. We saw Morgan Mahalik for the first time under center for Towson. At times looked like it was in sync, and at times Towson was in that game. I think it just, again, the FBS, the athleticism and the speed. Coach Ambrose talked about that on the call this week. The speed just really got to this team in the second half. Darius Victor still got his number, still got 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a positive to take in. Coming back home. Coach Rob Ambrose talked about, St. Francis is a team right now. His team knows who St. Francis is. They played this team last year, beat them 35-20. St. Francis, all they did last week, open up at Montana, 26,000 fans, one of the toughest environments in FCS football, and lost by 10 points, led in the third quarter. All-American returner specialist Lorenzo Jerome was named National Player of the Week as a return specialist, 196 yards on 4 kick returns. I know Rob Ambrose talked about him specifically in the coach's call to Key. I don't think Towson's going to have a letdown. They played St. Francis last year. They know how good St. Francis can be, a team who's played CA football tough in non-conference play the last couple of years.
2 games kick off at 7 o'clock to end week 2, beginning with the first game at the new Wildcat Stadium when New Hampshire hosts Holy Cross. This one will be live on ASN, Tim.
Yes, Holy Cross and New Hampshire have played a couple contests in the past. I know they've had a couple of home and home, a couple of away and away, but a strange game at San Diego State for New Hampshire. 31-0, and you're looking at it. San Diego State's a pretty good team, a team that's ranked by some people, a team that has won 11 straight games. It just felt a lot more than that. So the takeaway from that, offense didn't get it going, really. Only 70 yards passing between Trevor Knight and Adam Reese, so that quarterback situation, we're still not exactly sure. UNH defense, though, only allowed 170 yards rushing. If you said to us before the game they would only allow 170 yards rushing versus a San Diego State team that is one of the best rushing teams in the nation, you would take that, and you would say, okay, that's going to be – but you have to take that as a positive. Holy Cross beat Morgan State last week, 51-24. Their quarterback is a 4-year starter, Peter Pujols, a very good player. It's going to be interesting to watch the dynamic because San Diego State is going to run it down your throat, and New Hampshire got used to that and adjusted well. But Holy Cross is going to pass the ball all over the field. You can't get overwhelmed with saying, well, we're in a new stadium, everyone's going to be excited, so we're just going to show up and play. I think the Wildcats coming back home after that loss, it's disappointing, but you get to come back home in a new stadium, the first time ever running out in a new field like that. The excitement should take over, and I expect New Hampshire's offense to progress as the season continues, but especially this week at home versus Holy Cross. I think this should be a really good game. You can catch that, like you said, on ASN.
Last but not least, Maine hits the road again versus an FBS opponent to take on Toledo on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app.
I think I'm not alone in saying that I was surprised by Maine's effort, and I was ecstatic after that game. Despite the loss, you have to be impressed with that effort. 24-21 loss, you think about the difference between FCS and FBS. It's a couple of plays. It's special teams especially. Pardon the pun. But, you go to kick a field goal that's going to give you, and it gets partially blocked. Then all of a sudden UConn drives down. Hadn't done much the whole game, and then all of a sudden UConn drives down and kicks a game-winning field goal, deflates Maine. But a really good showing on TV. I know Maine really, a lot of people around CA football, not just fans, not just us, but coaches and players, I'm sure now are suddenly thinking, wow, Maine, that's a really impressive start. Malama Shamenga and Najee Good. Talk about that play where absolutely leveled the quarterback, picked up the ball, and then scored the touchdown too. So a heck of an effort. Only let UConn pass for 162 yards. Jaleel Reed too, a guy who we didn't expect to be the star receiver for this team, and maybe he won't, maybe he will. 6 catches though, a career day, 169 yards, and a touchdown. Really impressed with Dan Collins. We don't give credit a lot to the Maine quarterbacks because it's been so inconsistent in the last couple years. 19 of 33 for 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. How do you handle coming so close and knowing that you're a field goal away from beating UConn and now prep to play another FBS team in Toledo? Toledo's a team that beat Arkansas State handily last week on the road, 31-10. Interesting note, Jason Candle, the head coach for Toledo, is 36-year-old. Harris Simiak is 30-year-old. So it's going to be, I'm sure the commentators are going to be talking about that one a lot. But for Maine, you got to forget that one. I know it was a close and a great effort, but you got to forget that one and move on because it's going to be a tougher opponent this week in Toledo.
It'll be another busy Saturday, and CAFootball.com will have all the links you need to watch live streams, find TV clearances, and follow along. Tim and Mike Windley head to New Hampshire this weekend for CA Football's first on-campus trip, and you can watch our latest Going Deep feature next week.
I'm just really thrilled to get back on campus. I know Mike and I are looking forward to, there's a lot of stories that happen on the field, but even better stories that happen off. And I think a lot of people will really enjoy our first on-campus feature that will be next week. Mike will have that ready. It was a great start to the season on social media last week,
Yes,
and you
it
can
was.
follow CA Football on every platform, including Facebook at facebook.com/CA Football, as well as Instagram and Twitter via @CA Football, and of course, use the hashtag Join the Conversation, CAAFB.
That's all from us today. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the game Saturday.